Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Making Waves at Sea Level. Thanks a lot for coming along on the ride of this podcast that is designed to talk to people about how to shake things up, make waves, and find more success in the world of business. I have been doing this podcast for now about 7.5 years. We are over 700 episodes, and today we're going to talk about beating stress because, let's face it, stress is a real thing. And we are joined today by Dr. Katie Nall. Hey, Katie, how are you today?
Hey, Thom, I am fabulous and stress-free. How are you?
Awesome. Well, I'm sure most of the people listening don't even know what stress is because who has stress in today's world? Oh my gosh, almost everybody. So we're going to have a fun conversation. But before we do, I have to thank the first sponsor of this episode. So this episode is brought to you by Stanton Chase International, one of the leading global executive search firms serving as trusted advisors to help companies build their senior leadership teams. Let's face it, if you have to add somebody to that senior leadership team, maybe your CFO leaves, maybe you need a CMO, heck, maybe the company needs a new CEO, finding the right person is paramount to the success of the business. And that's where a great executive search firm comes in. So you want to know more about Stanton Chase. You can contact me directly because I work with Stanton Chase, and I will put you in touch with the best person for your industry anywhere in the world. All right. So for those of you who don't know Dr. Katie Nall, she is a Florida mathematician. She has a PhD in math. For those of you listening who hated math as a kid, could you have imagined just going to school for like 9 years to get all the way through your PhD? Yeah, I couldn't imagine that. But here's the thing. I have a future son-in-law who is actually got a master's degree from one of the top universities in the world in applied mathematics. And in order to get that far, you got to be really, really smart when it comes to math. So Dr. Nall, super smart when it comes to math. However, she's retired from the world of math and she's super interested in health. And she has put together this whole program that she speaks about how we can eliminate stress. And that is what we're going to talk about today. She is a little bit wacky, a little bit whimsical, and she is a speaker. She is a Qigong instructor. She facilitates masterminds and she tutors her 5-year-old granddaughters on math. How cool is that if you got 5-year-olds to have somebody in the family with a PhD in math? So Katie, welcome to the show, and we're going to have some fun today.
Thom, thank you so much. It's just definitely my honor and pleasure to be a guest on your incredible show.
It's great. It's great to have you here. So let's just jump in. How does a mathematician really become a leading expert in the world of stress? I don't think math. Oh, of course, that's how we beat stress. Let's multiply.
So, Thom, my husband will tell you that it's really good that I speak on stress because I don't get stress. He calls me a carrier. Everyone around me gets stress. So,
you don't get stress, you give stress.
Exactly. That's his interpretation anyway. I was a middle-aged student going back to get my PhD. I was in my mid-50s when I started the PhD program, and I was working at a college at the time in administration. As I was going through my PhD, I wanted to help students who had one class left to finish to get their degree. And that one class, they would come in and their hands would be sweaty and they'd say, I just have one class left to do. I'm like, great, let's get you registered. What is it? And they would all say, math. I'm like, fabulous. You saved the best for last. That isn't the way they felt about it, Thom. They were so scared of even talking about math. And as I was going through my research for my PhD, I wanted to help those students so that they could complete their degree. I did some research looking for how do you eliminate fear and anxiety in math. And you know what I found? Nothing. There was like nothing out there, but I recognized it as a word problem. And as your son-in-law can tell you, when you have a word problem, what you do is you extract the parts that are meaningful. And I was looking for how do you eliminate fear and anxiety? Well, it was in 2010, and I happened to see Nick Ortner's 10-day tapping summit. And I watched all 10 days because they were talking about fear of finances and anxiety about relationships and everything else. Nobody was talking about fear and anxiety about math or test taking. And so I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and go through this. I bought the book, I bought the DVD, and I had a room full of desperate clients. Now, Thom, you and I know desperate clients are the best, right? Because they will try anything. So the students came in one by one. I'm like, I have no idea if this will work or not. Nobody said whether it would work with math or test anxiety, but let's try it. So I got them in the office, and we would try the tapping and to see how they would feel and go through it.
Let me interrupt you real quick, because I know what tapping is, but I'm afraid a lot of people who are listening don't know the term. So can you please just tell us what is tapping, and then you can go forward with your story of helping the students.
Thank you. Tapping is emotional freedom technique, or EFT. It's a somatic method of reducing and eliminating stress. It has clinical studies that have been done all over the world for the last nearly 50 years now, showing that it's more effective than cognitive behavior therapy or talk therapy, and just as effective as something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming. However, with EFT, you don't need a therapist sitting in front of you. In fact, you could be working with a mathematician in Zoom. And once you know it, you can do it yourself. So it's non-addictive, non-invasive, and it's self-administered. So it's an amazingly powerful technique.
Awesome. So finishing the story, now we've got the students coming in. You're saying, hey, I don't know if this works, but we're going to try the tapping techniques. And what happened?
Yeah. So what happened is we did the tapping, and then we just kind of waited to see, what was going to happen. And then eventually, one by one, they would come in and they go, I think I passed my math class. Thom, I had no idea who was more surprised, them or me. I mean, we didn't know if it was going to work or not. So the first TEDx I did was about using tapping with math students. I just found out that an instructor at LSU, Louisiana State University, is suggesting that video to be used for their MBA students to help them get through their program because of the stress involved with that. But yeah, I actually had one student, I'll never forget him. His name was Scott. He was kind of a tall guy, a wide guy, he's pretty big. I'm 5'2", Thom. And so when a guy that size comes in my office, I pay attention and kind of grab my Raid can that's next to me, because I never know what they're going to be doing. And he came up and he stood there and he's wagging his finger at me and said, Dr. Nall. And I said, yeah. And he said, I need to come and talk to you. I was like, okay, came around my desk, swooped me up and said, if it hadn't been for that voodoo thing you taught me, I never would have passed. So it's an amazing technique that I've been able to use originally for math and test anxiety. Now, while I was working full time, I was able to complete my PhD in 4 years. And then I wanted to get this message out to others, to everyone in the C-suite who's suffering stress and going through years of therapy or doing other things, and letting people know that this is a quick, effective, efficient, and complete way to eliminate your stress. And so in that process, even though it took me 4 years to earn my PhD, it took me 8 years to become a master trainer in emotional freedom technique.
Interesting. So one of the things that you talk about is dissolving waffles, and you've turned waffles into a great acronym to help you through the process of what you do. So really quick, and then I want to hear about the process you take people through, but really quick, tell me about what is dissolving waffles. What are waffles?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you how waffles got into my life. When I first learned about tapping, I was so excited. I would grab complete strangers on the street and say, listen, I know you got a problem and I can fix it. And people would stay away from me. And then,
who is this person who wants me to touch my face? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Get her away. And then I moved from that to, let me tell you how exciting emotional freedom technique is, or tapping, everything. And everybody wanted me to start dancing. It's like, no, it's not tap dancing. And so I was trying to figure a way to introduce people into this wonderful modality of tapping. And I couldn't figure it out until I came up with what tapping does. And that is, it dissolves your stress. And I came up with an acronym of really what it does is dissolves your waffles. It dissolves your worries, dissolves your anxiety, your fear, frustration, lethargy, exhaustion, and stress.
Nice. All right. So let's talk about the process that you take people through. What is your process, and how can the average person become less stressed?
Well, obviously they can work with a certified practitioner, but to do it on their own, there are 6 things that I usually ask a client. One thing is, what is it that's causing you stress? Think about in the last 24 or 44 hours, anything that's caused you any waffles. Then I ask, what emotion does that bring up? So you may have gotten scared by something that happened, 48 hours ago or so. But now when you think about it, you may feel sad or a different kind of emotion. So what is your current emotion right now? Then an interesting question, and here's where the somatic part of the somatic method comes into, Thom, is that I ask from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, where do you feel that emotion in your body? Then I ask it, I advise them that everything that we say has to be true. So is this a true statement? Right here, right now, I feel safe. And if it's not, I have a number of other acceptance statements we can go through because it has to be true for the client. Then I ask from 0 to 10, where 0 is like, no big deal. And 10 is the most intense you've ever felt this emotion. What number is it? And then finally, I ask them that if I ask them to repeat a word or a phrase and it's not the truth for them, will they restate it in their own words? And so those are the questions that I ask people. And if you'd like to see a demo, I'd love to do one with you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We'll do this. We'll turn making waves at sea level into my stress reduction personal lab.
So first of all, we'll start with, and if anyone, those of you who are listening to the podcast while you're driving, don't do this. Okay. But if you're sitting here, I'd love for you to do it along. We're going to try it first without words, and then we'll add the words just so that you have some idea of what we're doing. So if you have your palm, if you're looking at your palm of one hand, it doesn't matter, either hand, the area between your wrist and your little finger, take 4 fingers of your other hand and tap right there. So I have 4 fingers of my right hand tapping on the side of my left hand. And when we tap there, Thom, I'm going to ask you to repeat 3 sentences as we tap there. The next spot is on the top of your head, and you can use your right hand or your left hand, or you can look like a monkey and do both hands. And then the next spot is above your nose on the edge of your eyebrow. And then the next spot is on your temple between your edge of your eye and your hairline. And again, you can use one hand or the other or both. It doesn't matter. And then, Thom, the next spot is where I keep my bags for a quick getaway. And that's under my eyes. And then under your nose. And then under your lips. And then cross your hands with your palm at your wrist with your palms facing you, and just go right there and right below your collarbones and tap there. And you can breathe while we're doing this. And then the last spot, Thom, is about 4 inches under your arm, and you're going to thump your ribs. And again, you can use one side or the other side, or give yourself a hug and do it, or come in from the side. It doesn't matter, any of those spots. So those are the tapping points. This was all developed by electrical engineer Gary Craig, who was trained at Stanford University. He saw traditional Chinese medicine meridians, and he saw them as electrical circuits. And he said, you know what, if we tap on these 8 points, and this is what's called the basic recipe, there's many more beyond this, but if we tap on those 8 points, we're going to hit 96 to 98% of the meridians. In traditional Chinese medicine, it's believed that stress and disease and everything is a blockage in your energy system, and tapping frees the blockage and allows your energy to flow. So let's try it on you. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So let me ask you, in the last 24 to 48 hours, has anything caused you any waffles?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what's interesting about tapping is that if you'd like to say what it was, you can, but you don't have to.
All right. I'm not going to.
Fine. Now, when you think about whatever it was that happened in the last 24 to 48 hours, what emotion are you feeling right now thinking about it? What negative emotion?
Self-doubt.
What'd you say?
Self-doubt.
Self-doubt. Okay, great. Self-doubt. And from the top of your head to the bottom of your toes, when you think about that event that happened in the last 24 to 48 hours and that self-doubt, where do you feel that feeling of self-doubt in your body?
Right above my stomach.
Right above your stomach. And from 0 to 10, where 0 is like, no big deal, and 10 is most self-doubt you felt in your entire life, what number would you give that?
3.5.
3.5 is great. You threw in the half for me, didn't you?
Well, you're a mathematician. Yeah. Fractions.
I love the fractions. And is this a true statement? Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Yes.
Okay, for those of you listening, if that's not a true statement, alternatives can be right here, right now. Someday I hope to feel safe, or right here, right now, I accept my emotions, or right here, right now, I'm okay. There's lots of different offerings I offer clients as we go along. So, and if I ask you to repeat something, Thom, and you go, I wouldn't have used those words. For instance, you told me that you felt it, was it right above or right below your stomach?
Right above.
Right above your stomach. And it's, instead of saying right above your stomach, if I would have said your chest or something, that's not what you said. So would you please, for me, repeat words that are true for you?
I feel the stress kind of right about the bottom of my rib cage, top of my stomach.
Great. Okay, so you ready to start?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm using my right hand. You can use either hand. I'm using 4 fingers of my right hand to tap on the left side of my the left side of my left hand, and repeat after me and say, even though. When I think about that event that just happened.
Okay.
So repeat after that. Say,
even though I think about that event.
Right now, I feel self-doubt.
Right now, I feel self-doubt.
And I feel it right above my stomach.
And I feel it right above my stomach.
Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Right here, right now, I feel safe.
And we're going to do that 2 more times. Even though.
Thinking
about that event. I feel self-doubt right above my stomach.
I feel self-doubt right above my stomach.
Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Last time. Even though.
Thinking
about that event that happened.
I'm thinking about that event that happened.
I feel that self-doubt right above my stomach.
I feel that self-doubt right above my stomach.
Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Right here, right now, I feel safe.
And then top of your head, you can tap and say, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
Above your nose or on the edge of your eyebrow, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
On your temple, side of your eye, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
Under your eye, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
Under the nose, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
Under the lips, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
On the collarbone, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
And then on your ribs, self-doubt right above my stomach.
Self-doubt right above my stomach.
And then blow all your air out. And if you have water nearby, you can take a sip of water. And then Thom, when you think back to that event, the self-doubt from 0 to 10, where is it now?
Kind of 0? Yeah. I don't feel like I did 2 minutes ago.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of tapping.
Fascinating. Well, I've got more questions then about tapping and about stress relief. But first, I have to thank the other sponsor of this episode. So this episode, like all of them, is brought to you by Podfly Productions. Podfly takes the time and the headache out of creating your own podcast. They set you up with the right equipment, training, and guidance to ensure you're going to sound amazing. Podfly does all the heavy lifting and that pesky technical work so that you can focus on creating great content, growing your audience, and interviewing people who are making waves in business like Dr. Katie Nall. Hey, if you want to start a podcast, and I know that some of you do, jump over to podfly.net/coolthings and check out the offer that they have for the listeners of this show. All right. So what's the pushback, Katie, that you hear from people about tapping? Don't people sometimes go, this is a little hokey wokey?
So great question, Thom. When I first started learning about it, my first volunteer victim was my husband. I sat him down on the couch. I'm like, come here, honey. I said, I want you to sit down and tell me all the negative things that happened today. And he looked at me side-eye and was like, this is a trap, right?
There's no good answer to come from this, right? Yeah.
You've been telling me to be positive for 40 years and now you want me to be negative? And I said, you know what? That positive thing, not working. We're going to do this instead. So we went through it, and because I lived with him, I knew all the things that were negative. I knew he was struggling with a client. I knew he was having computer problems, and I knew he had a vendor who was not answering his questions. So I brought them up one after another in different tapping sessions. Well, Thom, he got up, put his hands on his hips, and he said, well, that was a waste of time. And I said, okay. Next day, he came home from work, and I said, how was your day, honey? And he said something I seldom hear. He said, it was great. And I said, well, what about that client that's been giving you such a hard time? He's like, oh, we talked, got it all worked out. What about that computer problem you were having? Oh, I called support and they helped me, step me through it. Well, what about that vendor that you were having? He's like, oh, we got everything fixed and my refund's coming. So tapping doesn't work, right? And I do have some clients from time to time that are there because somebody else sent them. And they start off with, I know this isn't going to work. I know this is, in fact, I had a client who was a federal law enforcement agent, and he said, I just want to let you know, I know my mother is crazy and I kind of think you're crazy, but you have a PhD. And so I'm only here because my mother told me I had to come here. And I was like, okay, let's start off. He is a completely changed person now. And yeah, so that's the cool thing. It's like, you didn't have to tell me what the event was. People don't have to believe in it because it's your body, and your body knows and your body believes. So I get pushback from time to time, and I'm like, that's great. That's fine. That's fabulous. Try it. See what happens.
So if people try it and they're able to reduce that, the worry, the anxiety, the fear, the frustration, the lethargy, the exhaustion, and the stress, if they could get rid of the waffles, and personally, the way I like to get rid of waffles is with lots of syrup and I eat them, but whatever. So if people can dissolve the waffles and do this, how can that lead them to more success in their business?
Well, great question. As it turns out, when you're stressed, you have a physiological reaction. You begin secreting hormones. The oxygen leaves your brain and goes to large muscle groups. And so you lose the capability of being able to think straight, of being able to make decisions, of being able to be an effective employer in your position, because you can't think. You're under so much stress that you just become an automaton. You just do whatever you can do automatically with anything you can do without having to think. Reducing and eliminating the stress is going to allow you to be a more effective leader. It's going to allow you to be able to handle the situations that come up, because situations always come up. And when the new situations come up, you can tap them away. Usually people at a higher level, they don't just have a higher level of responsibility in their business, they have a higher level of responsibility in their relationships, in their family, in their community. They're being pulled in all kinds of directions. And until they can learn to, first of all, recognize the stress, because so many of us are saying, oh, I'm not feeling good, but I think I'm just going to power through it, right? I've done that, I don't know how many times. And recognizing that stress, being able to address it and feel it in your body, and to be able to eliminate it, is going to make you an incredibly much more productive employer.
So as a speaker, when you go into companies and talk, do you put the whole audience through sort of an exercise like we just did?
Well, it depends on what the group wants. I sometimes I do that. Sometimes I do a mini training so that I have partners at tables practice on one another. So that they can get it, because that's the beauty. That's what I love so much about this, Thom, is that you can do it yourself. So depending on the time and the criteria of what the client wants, I can usually bring one person up on stage, and I ask the rest of the audience to tap along with us, because there's something called borrowing benefits. The person on stage may have an issue that nobody else in the audience has, and it may be in a part of the body that nobody else admits. Like, I've had clients who have all of their emotions are in their elbow or their little toe, but because they tap along with us, people in the audience have what they call borrowing benefits, and they may feel an energy shift themselves. And then having the audience members practice on one another, asking those questions, and then practicing on it. The last training I did, I had a couple of people who were very well trained in other modalities, and I had to remind them, this is so easy. You don't have to do all those other things that you've done with other modalities. This is like super simple, super easy.
All right. So obviously not every CEO in the world is going to be like, this is what I need for my team. Not everybody's going to be woo-woo enough, if you will, or open-minded enough, or just like, hey, let's try things. And I'm a real big believer in you got to try lots of things. Throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks. What type of people typically hire you? What is the profile of people who go, oh yeah, this is for us?
Not surprisingly, mostly women groups, because, and I don't know why, people can say a lot of generalities, but women may feel the stress more or understand the stress more. I have had some organizations, because I came from a college, so there's other colleges and universities that I've worked with, and some emergency workers, because they see the stress. So many of them have PTSD just from what they've seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's people, it's usually the groups that recognize what stress is and recognize the damage that stress can do to them and their organization.
All right. So if somebody is like, no, I got to know more about Dr. Katie Nall, how do they find you? What's your website? How do people get in touch with you?
I'm a bit of a wordsmith. My last name is Nall, Nall. And so my website is my last name, Nall, followed by the word edge, EDGECO.com. It's knowledgecompany.com.
Knowledge. I get that. It's knowledge.
I'm on all the social media under Katie Nall, PhD. So it's KATIENALL, PhD. And they can call me directly. I would love to hear from your listeners. My phone number is area code 772-226-0167. I always put that challenge out there, and
nobody ever calls. I know.
Nobody ever calls.
I do the same thing. I tell people, like, people always say, oh, I'd love, I'm interviewed and people are like, oh, if people want to learn more about what you do, I'm like, oh, they can just email me or call me all the time. And occasionally people email, but nobody ever calls.
Nobody calls. Yeah.
Okay. So somebody's still listening. I just want you to go and call Katie Nall right now. All right. So last words on stress for the audience before I let you go.
Last words on stress. Here's a phrase that's gotten me through a lot of stress, is that this too shall pass. And whether you're having a fabulous day and everything's perfect, stop and enjoy it. Stop and understand how your body's feeling, enjoy it, because this too shall pass. And if you're waking up and everything is going wrong, take a deep breath and understand this too shall pass.
Awesome. Well, Katie, thank you so much for being a guest here on Making Waves at Sea Level.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
And for everybody who's listening, I say it every single episode. If it wasn't for the audience, why would we do the show? So keep coming back every single week. We do 2 episodes. Check them out. And make sure you tell your friends, because when I find people who listen to the podcast and I say, how'd you find my podcast? I mean, there's only 2.3 million podcasts that have been started over the last decade plus. People say, oh, it's because my mom, my brother, my boss, my coworker, someone told me that this was a show that I should listen to. So make sure you're telling your friends. You can leave one of those fancy reviews on Apple or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcast joy. But in the meantime, go out there, flex your business muscles, make sure that your career ladder is in the right place, because you don't want to climb that wall to find out your career ladder was in the wrong place, because that sucks. And then finally, go out there and have some fun along the way. Have a great day.